Okay, so we're going to start. Thank you for attending to this training session. Well, I would like to say you that at Igenomix, as you know, we are reinforcing the corporate governance model, and corporate governance has two main pillars. One pillar is ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and the other one is compliance. And inside compliance, we develop the criminal risk model. So I would like to introduce you Deloitte team, as they are our strategic partner, helping us to achieve all our goals in these two areas.
Yes, well, thank you very much for coming today. We are a multidisciplinary team. We come from Deloitte. She's my colleague Marta from Risk Advisory, and I'm Marta as well. I come from the legal team. We have been developing a compliance model here in Igenomix. So we're gonna see how important is this and all the elements that make up this control model. So should you have any query or any doubt, just raise your hand and let us know and at any time, okay? So yeah, what we're gonna see is all the legal background, why it's so important to have a model of compliance and all the control environment. And the objectives of this training session is, first of all, that all employees get to know about this model of compliance and get to know the main criminal risks and associated controls that make up this compliance model. We always like to start by the Code of Ethics because we understand that it's one of the most relevant documents in the compliance model of any company. It includes all those principles of action that any agent that works for or in Igenomix needs to comply with. We're not going to see all this content because it could be a little bit boring for you, but just to let you know that you have it available on the intranet of the company. And if you have any doubt about it, just report it to the Global Compliance Committee, as we will see it later.
Everyone is aware of this Code of Ethics. Did you have the chance to have a look at it on the intranet or yes? Good, good. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's not always like that, just to let you know. But where comes the importance to have a compliance model? Well, we have to say that the development of international standards and international best practices are making a lot of pressure in companies. So what are the main regulations that we have taken into account? First of all, the FCPA from the US and the UK Bribery Act from the UK. They both punish acts of corruption. And there are many others legislations like the OECD Anti-Corruption Convention or the United Nations Global Compact or even the ISOs, which are really, really important, and we will see its context now. But going back to the legislation, the wise in Spain and of course in the partners, in 2010, companies could only be held liable for civil issues. And after the first important amendment of the criminal code here in Spain, companies can all be held criminally liable for conducts, for offenses committed in the name of or on behalf of the legal entity, or for offenses committed in the exercise of social activities. Okay. After, in 2015, this second important amendment of the criminal code introduces the possibility of companies of being exempted from criminal responsibility if you have implemented in your company an efficient global compliance model. So that's why we are today here. But what are the main elements that a compliance model should have? So there's a wide range of elements, which are, first of all, to entrust the supervision and the operation of the model to an organ with autonomous powers of initiative and control, which is the Global Compliance Committee, as we will see later. Then to identify those areas or those activities in which those crimes could be committed. You have to establish as well protocols or procedures that demonstrate the willingness of the company to comply with the law, to make things right. Of course, to provide specific training sessions as we are doing now, to have models for managing the financial resources of the model, to impose the obligation of reporting any breach, any violation, not only of the code of ethics, but also of the compliance model, and to have a disciplinary system that gives a response to those breaches, to those violations. And the last one, to carry out periodical verifications of the model.
Just one clarification. Yeah. Igenomix right now, we could say that it complies with this model because we have everything that the penal code established here. So except from the last one, which would be the periodical verification, which of course will be in the future, the rest of the elements, Igenomix is fully compliant with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what we have been doing during the last months, which is to analyze all the legislations of the main countries where Igenomix operates, which are Spain, obviously, the US, Brazil, Japan, India, and United Emirates. And of course, if you see all the shadows are those accomplishments of the law. And as Marta said, Igenomix complies with all of them. And well, these very periodical verifications will come in the future. What are the main penalties that a company or a natural person could be charged for? We have to make a distinction. In case of the former, a company could be charged by quotas or economical fines, the dissolution of the legal entity, the closure of its premises, and even the prohibition to carry out in the future commercial activities, and of course, judicial intervention. In the case of the latter, if we are in front of a natural person, this person could be charged by quotas or economical fines, prison sentences, and the special disqualification from obtaining public employments or from bidding. Okay, there are other consequences apart from the aforementioned ones, which are really, really important. For example, the reputational damage. Getting a fine is, of course, a bad thing, but you just pay for it and that's all. But if you have your reputation damaged, that could also be worse than the economic fine, but because that could be forever. So that's why it's so important to take into account these kinds of elements. And the last thing we wanted to tell you about the legal background is the concept of extraterritoriality. This means that Igenomix could not only be held criminally liable for those offenses committed here in Spain, but also for those committed abroad by its subsidiaries. So that's why we have implemented a global compliance model here in the company, okay, to avoid these kinds of problems. So now we've seen all the elements that a global compliance model should have, but we need to know what has been done specifically in Igenomix. The first one was to have an organ with autonomous powers of initiative and control. In Igenomix, we have 4 governing bodies: the board of directors, the global compliance committee, the country managers, and the control owners. The first one, the board of directors, is in charge of the management and the operation of not only the compliance model, but all the social purposes, as you know. The global compliance committee is responsible for the supervision and the monitoring, and it is the second line of defense, as will Marta mention afterwards. The country managers are the supporting body to whom the Global Compliance Committee may delegate some functions of the model. This especially makes sense in a company which is global, because the Global Compliance Committee cannot be on a daily basis on those tasks taken in all the countries. So that's why the existence of these country managers are so important. It's so important. And the last one are the control owners of the different areas, which are on a daily basis on those tasks carried out in the company and which constitute the first line of defense. The second one of these elements was the identification of activities of those areas in which those criminal offenses could be committed. So we have carried out a wide range of interviews in all the areas that make up Igenomix, and we have identified several criminal risks that could be committed. This doesn't mean that these criminal risks are taken place in the company, but that hypothetically, if some circumstances may occur, these criminal risks could be committed. So we have included all the results of these interviews in the risk and control matrix. And this control and risk matrix includes not only the justification of why we have identified certain risks, but also why we have not identified certain risks. As well, we have included the prioritization, which means those criminal risks that are more important than others in the company, which is really, really important. The third one are those protocols, policies, and procedures that demonstrate the willingness of the company to comply with the law and to make things right. In the case of Igenomix, the most important that we believe are the code of ethics, as we mentioned before, and the compliance and criminal risk prevention policy, which demonstrates the refusal of all employees to non-compliance with the law, and many others, like the purchase policy and the travel and entertainment policy. The fourth of it is training from Igenomix. We have developed a specialized program for training for all of you to get to know about the compliance model and its importance. And well, it's what we are taking now. And the financial resources. This is twofold. First of all, Igenomix not only has to have procedures to controlling its own financial resources, but also you have to have all the appropriate human and material resources so that the development of the model is the efficient one. Okay, that's really, really. The whistleblowing channel, Marta will talk about it later, but just to let you know, it exists. And three aspects are very important about it are that reports can be anonymous, that Igenomix ensures the maximum confidentiality about all the process of these reportings, and that retaliation against the employee is strictly forbidden. The next one, is the disciplinary system. Just to let you know that complying with the law and with the policies of the company is strictly of the utmost importance. And in case of any reports or any violations, there are a wide range of measures in order to give a response to these violations of the code of ethics or even of the compliance model. And the last one was the verification of the model. A compliance model needs to be an alive document. It doesn't make sense to have an efficient global compliance model, and if you don't verify it, if you don't update it to the reality of the company, it doesn't really make sense. So that's why it's so important to carry out periodical verifications of the same.
Yes. So you need to verify it like in an annual period, more or less, because the company might engage in new risk or the company might develop new controls. So everything needs to be updated in all the deliverables that my colleague has just presented to you, such as the matrix of controls or the different policy. Everything should be updated until the last moment.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna go through all those identified criminal offenses that we have identified in Igenomix. If you have any doubt about it, or just let us know if we need to explain it in another way. Okay. So the first one is genetic manipulating. It consists of altering the genotype of any sample that you have for other purposes than reducing or eliminating any disease, or even to use engineering in order to produce weapons. This doesn't mean that in Igenomix you are committing this crime. Of course, we certainly know, but we have identified it just in case, for example, anyone has the knowledge, the sufficient knowledge in order to take it to carry out. So that's the main reason we have identified it. The second one is public corruption and business corruption. This is one of the main criminal offenses that we use to identify at any company, is really relevant. And public corruption consists of 4 conducts: bribery, influence peddling, corruption of public officials in economic and international transactions, and illegal funding of political parties. The first one consists of offering or delivering to public officials any gift or any compensation in order to obtaining a compensation to your company. We are thinking of, for example, we are here in Igenomix, and we received the visit of a labor inspection. And in order to getting a favorable report, we offer him the last tickets for the football match. So that could be that compensation that we are obtaining, that report, and we are offering that gift. The second one is influence peddling. It is also to get an advantage for your company, but this time is by using a situation of that you have with that person. For example, you have your brother that works in the city hall, and you ask him to get an administrative license for your company. That would be to use that influence peddling, okay, in the benefit of your company. The third one is the same as the 2 first ones that we have mentioned before, but in an international sphere, okay, with international public officials. And the last one, illegal funding of political parties, is to receive or to donate to political parties because you know that it is strict. In the case of business corruption, it is quite similar to the conduct of public corruption, but in a private sphere. Okay, is to offer, for example, if you hire a supplier here in Igenomix for the acquisition of raw materials, and you ask him a discount in this acquisition, giving him a gift that would be immersed.
So what I was asking is, we're planning to offer services to the state, right? And we're going to offer 2 services that we actually do in the lab. And one of the things they're going to ask is that, for example, for NIPT positive samples, they're going to ask us to cover the amnio test. Would that be considered bribery? Would that be considered incentives to the state?
Can I answer that question? In my opinion, my humble opinion, absolutely not. This is a normal practice in the industry. It's part of the complementary test that they will request. So I would not see any problem there. This is not the kind of bribery. Bribery would be that you provide a personal incentive to an official. This is a complementary test for the patients.
Yes. And also within Igenomix, of course, we have identified these risks, but we also have some controls in place in the company, such as the gift policy, which is included in the Code of Ethics. And you can go through it and have a look at that, and you will see exactly what types of gifts are allowed or not within the company. For example, of course, if you offer a bottle, that wouldn't be any type of bribery, but if you offer, as my colleagues say, like the tickets for the football match or some iPhone, then you might be suffering this type of risk.
Yes, that's it. So the next one is fraud. This happens when you use enough deception in another person, so that person acquires something that really doesn't need. For example, if you have any client here and you recommend that person, I don't know, gives a try to one genetic test when he really doesn't need it, that could be considered as fraud. Okay. Next one is against personal and familiar privacy and the disclosure of trade secrets. The first one consists of seizing, using, modifying, disclosing personal data of others without its consent. These criminal risks is usually associated with certain areas such as the human resources department, which are continuously working with personal data. So just to let you know that using data from others, this is quite obvious, but it happens. So it's forbidden, okay? And the other is the disclosure of trade secrets. This one, we are thinking of some examples. For example, we hire an employee from another company from the same sector, and this employee brings to our company the list of other clients, and I don't know, it uses some confidential information about the previous company to use it in our profit. This is quite often as well. We are not thinking of the know-how or the personal knowledge that one employee has, because obviously that goes with the person, but we are thinking of this confidential information about the other company or from clients.
One way to mitigate this risk would be in the contract of the employee, the initial contract, some kind of the establishment of some clause which will state that in no case the employee might bring to Igenomix some confidential information. And regarding the first one, regarding the risk against personal family privacy, Igenomix has adapted itself to the new data protection regulation in the European Union. So it's also well controlled, and that's why the residual risk of these two risks will remain low in Igenomix.
Computer damages is not a really relevant criminal risks in Igenomix. We are thinking of certain companies in which the online sales are the major asset. So, for example, it's Christmas, and in order to the public not buying that company, you hack into their computer systems so that this public don't buy in that company and buys in your company. Okay. So we are thinking about that, and for example, here in Igenomix, it could materialize in case of, I don't know, you permit the access to certain other person that do not work in Igenomix, and they hack into your computer system, okay? And they obviously cause a harmful situation. The misleading advertising is to offer or advertise any products or services which are not true, which tend to make false allegations or information that is not the specific ones in order to get a profit to your company.
Regarding misleading advertising, we have as well some controls once again. So for example, Igenomix has a marketing plan. So everything that goes to the outside, it's reviewed by different people before it's published. So that's a good control as well. We also have complaints policies, and we also have like annual surveys of satisfaction where the clients can report any incidents that have lived during the experience in Igenomix.
The obstruction of inspection activity could materialize in case of we receive an inspection here and we refuse to cooperate with them, and we do not offer them the information, the documentation that they are requiring us. Yeah. price manipulations, this consists of altering the prices that would result from the free competition of products on services. There was a very relevant case here in Spain last year that were like the five main petrol companies here in Spain that used to arrange some meetings in petrol stations to fix prices and to get a market division. So this could materialize hypothetically in Igenomix if you arrange some meetings with other competitors in the sector and you tend to fix prices or other collusive practices. Crimes against intellectual and industrial property. This is a twofold crime offense, which could not only materialize in case you use certain products or services that are under legal protection or patented, but also if you use a license in your computer that has been duplicated. Okay.
You have the two controls that we have identified. So Javier Cajigas, as everyone know, has a very good control regarding trademarks and patents. Everything is recorded with the expiration date and is also controlled by external advisor, which helps Igenomix to control these risks. And also regarding regarding images that my colleague was saying, we have like a database that we have bought internally, you have bought in Igenomix, so that every image that is published has the rights of publication, so you don't commit this crime.
The next one is fraud against the public treasury, social security, and breach and misrepresentation of accounting obligations. The first of it is to defraud the state public treasury by an amount greater than 120,000 euros. This quantity used to be less before the first amendment of the criminal code in Spain, but well, we received a lot of cases of fraud, so they decided, the legislator tend to higher this quantity. The social security fraud is about making the frauds to the social insurance in an amount of 50,000 euros. And then the next one, the breach and misrepresentation of accounting obligations, is to fail to comply with all the accounting obligations or with the accounting books and records of your company.
Of course, Igenomix financial statements are audited by an external party, so everything that is stated here is also well managed and controlled.
Yeah. This happens when you are in an imminent situation of insolvency. You have certain obligations with your creditors and you don't want to pay them. So you reduce the patrimony that you have in order to not satisfy with those obligations you have with your creditors. Subsidy fraud and fraud in the US general budget. First one is twofold as well. So, for example, we are thinking of the situation where we are applying for a certain subsidy, even in Spain or in the in worldwide, I mean. And there are some requirements for the obtention of this subsidy. So in order to getting this subsidy, you falsify all those documents that you have in your company for the obtention of this subsidy. Or the second option, option B, is once you have obtained this subsidy and you not use this economic subsidy that you got for the purposes that it was intended. For example, here in Igenomix, we apply for a study, for a subsidy in order to carry on a study, and you don't use that money for that study, but you use it for, I don't know, for painting your premises. That could be a subsidy fraud, okay? And the fraud in the US, in the EU's general budget, is to defraud the general budgets of the European Union, the same content that we were explaining before for the public state in Spain, but in the European sphere. money laundering and terrorist financing. Well, the first one is when you acquire, possess, use, convert, or transmit any property, knowing that it proceeds and it has its origins from an illicit conduct. Okay, and the second one is to make available property or properties of any kind. And you know that they are going to be used for the commission of terrorist offense. That's why it's very important to have here in Igenomix the correct due diligence measures and to get to know the origin of any operation. Against natural resources and the environment and crimes of risk caused by explosives. Well, both of them are quite related, and it has to do with any harm that you do to the environment by the emission, discharge, radiation, extraction, or for the use of any inflammable substance or explosive. Okay. Yeah. And this one is quite related with the aforementioned ones, but by the ionizing radiation or any other means of exposure to such radiation. Here in Igenomix, I guess you are exposed to some substances that could be inflammable. So that's why it's so important to get to know about the procedures and all the norms of prevention. Against public health, well, this could be, there are three possibilities in front of this public offense. The first one is to offer in the market products that could be harmful to health. We are not thinking of this one. The second one is to not meeting the requirements of expiration or composition of any service or product. We are not thinking of this one. And the third one, to manufacture, shipping, supplying, or trading in substances that could be harmful for health. In the case of Igenomix, we were thinking of not categorizing well those certain services or products that could be offered in the market. Against worker rights, this can be committed if you impose working conditions that are not the adequate to the human rights, or even if you treat your workers in conditions of inequality or discrimination. That's why it's so important to take into account the context of the code of ethics that really regulates these situations. Against foreign citizens is to favor the entrance or the transit of certain foreigners in breach of current legislation in the matter. So that's why here in Igenomix, well, they ask you obviously not only your ID but all your personal documentation in order to comply with these legal requirements. I repeat that this is really obvious, but it happens in certain companies. An offense is committed in connection with the exercise of fundamental rights. This is to encourage, promote any discrimination of certain individuals in the company for reasons such as, I don't know, the ideology, religion, gender, or any other characteristics. And the last one, I promise, smuggling is to import or to export goods without presenting it to the customs office or defrauding the customs office. Now we're going to explain the control environment and how we have evaluated the criminal risks in Igenomix. So we have the inherent risk, the management level, and the residual risk. The first one is the inherent risk, and we evaluate the criminal risks taking into account its impact and its probability. The first one, its impact. Well, we're going to see. Do you know what is the inherent risk of a criminal offense? I guess no. Okay. Well, it is the risk faced by the company in the absence of general or specific controls that mitigate its commission. And we calculate this inherent risk, this impact, taking into account 4 criteria: the economic one, reputational, operational, and location of the risk. The first one, it is calculated according to whether this materialization of the risk entails the imposition of economic fines. The second one, the reputational, is just in case, just if the commission of the crime tends to occur, if your reputation could be damaged. The operational is that in the event of a possible conviction of this crime, your areas, your premises could be closed, and you could not continue working on them. And the fourth one, the location of the risk, it is assessed whether on it is located, if it affects the board of directors or any back office areas. And the probability of the inherent risk is calculated taking into account 4 criteria as well: the frequency of occurrence, the reiteration of the risk, the complexity, and the malice or negligence. Now I give the floor to my colleague Marta that will explain the residual risk.
Thank you. So now we've seen all the risks that Igenomix has faced or might be exposed to, and we see how we calculate the inherent risk, which is the risk in the absence of controls. And now we are going to see how we are going to calculate the residual risk, which is determined by the management level. This is that depending on the controls that Igenomix has, we will face a different residual risk, which might be higher or lower. If it's higher, then it means that we need to develop more controls in the company so we can lower the residual risk. In order to calculate it, we will take into account the existence of controls. We will take also into account if the controls are sufficient or not, and lastly, if the controls are efficient or not. To calculate the efficiency of the controls, we will need to audit them, and then once they are audited, then we will be able to determine whether they are effective or not. So here is the risk map that Igenomix has produced, following by our project here with you. And in the top, you can see the inherent risk of Igenomix, which is very different from the residual risk, which is the one taking into account the controls. So what does this second graphic tell us? It tells us that the environment control of Igenomix is very robust. So you have loads of controls, which we have identified thanks to your interviews as well to your documents and policies. And the only risk that remain a bit low, a bit high, which is not high, it's only medium, it would be the money laundering risk. So why? Because you have clients which are exposed to a higher risk of money laundering due to the fact that they are located in high-risk countries, such as, for example, Middle East. So what we are going to do next, we are going to develop a policy of third parties, which will identify those type of clients and will apply new diligence towards those clients, so we can lower the residual risk, and in the future maybe we could see this risk into a green color. Okay, so what do we have now in Igenomix? So followed by the project we have developed, we have several deliverables. And the first one, as my colleague Marta mentioned before, was the matrix of controls and risk. So there we have the controls that have been identified in Igenomix, as well as the risk that my colleague has just presented to you. So this is a live document. This means that it needs to be updated on a periodical way, which for us, the ideal way would be on an annual basis, due to the fact that, as we were mentioning before, new controls might develop or new risk might appear or disappear as well. So those would be the risk and control matrix. Then you have the compliance and criminal prevention policy. This is like as a declaration of Igenomix towards stakeholders. This is a supplier, clients, government, etc. That Igenomix is fully compliant with ethics, with compliance model and everything. So every time they request us a policy in which our values are stated, then we can deliver our stakeholders this type of policy. Then we have the Compliance and Criminal Risk Prevention Manual. We have two manuals. We have the general one and the specific one. The general one must be approved by the board of directors. So we have these two manuals, which would be the general one, which I was mentioning is the one that you deliver to a judge. In case AI genomic, we don't want that to happen, but this will be the document that you deliver to a judge, and it needs to be approved by the board of directors. Then we have the specific manual, and these manuals identify all the criminal risks that Igenomix is exposed to, as well as the controls. And then we have the monitoring guide. This guide is an element for the Global Compliance Committee, and it will explain how the monitor should happen regarding this model and what steps the Global Compliance Committee needs to take. Okay, so regarding governance, as my colleague was mentioning before, Igenomix has a model based on the 3 lines of defense. So we have 3 different lines. The first line of defense would be the business units or the heads of departments. So the first line of defense is in charge of applying the controls and is the line that is more exposed to the risks. So they need to apply the controls, and if not, or if they see any risk, they need to raise their attention to the Global Compliance Committee, which is the second line of defense. Okay, so the second line of defense is in charge to the monitoring of all this model. And finally, the third line of defense would be either an internal audit function or either an external audit function. So they will be in charge of reviewing on a periodic as well this model, and it will give you like an assurance from an external party. Then governance, regarding governance, we have the board of directors, firstly, which is the ultimate responsible for compliance and criminal risk prevention model. This implies, in short, that they have like several functions to accomplish. So they need to establish the tone from the top. So if the board of directors is not committed towards this model, then nobody in the company will be committed. So they need to establish this tone on the top. And then they need to assure that the model is executed and verified in a periodic way. We will move forward just to be a little bit quicker. Then the next organ that we will have regarding governance would be the Global Compliance Committee. So this is a key element in the configuration of this model, and it's named by the board of directors. As the function that the Global Compliance Committee has, they should have like a detailed knowledge of the company's activities. Otherwise, they won't be able to raise any type of concerns or to see whether a risk is happening or not. So they should know very well the company's activities as well as the procedures. This Global Compliance Committee should also have the authority to ensure any type of decision that is taken by this committee, and it should have autonomy and independence as well. It's also advisable that this committee has experts on the matter so they can know the activities from Igenomix. So nowadays, the committee is composed by experts here in Igenomix who will be Guillermo, which is in part of the internal control, as well of Javier and Emma. So every important topic will be covered within this committee. Continue with the functions. They should establish proper governance and policies, which are already developed here. They should communicate and do some training, which is also complied here as we are doing currently. They should control and monitor the model. So on an annual frequency, this model should be controlled as well. In case of any violation, they should report it as well to the board of directors. And they are also in charge of the whistleblowing channel. So in case any employee raise a concern, they have to analyze it in a confidential way, and then make some statistics about how many reports or violation they receive from employees in Igenomix. And finally, the documentation is also very important, not only the documentation that is generated by the compliance committee, but also the documentation within the Igenomix. So they have the power to request every one of you like some documents they need, so they can analyze any concern or violation raised through the whistleblowing channel. Then we have the controls owners. This is, as we were mentioning before, the first line of defense. So the control owners must take as their responsibility to ensure that the controls are properly developed within the company. So they must have a look at every document and the matrix as well, and see whether the controls are well defined or not, as well as if they are working properly or not. If they are not, they should of course change in and develop additional controls. So one element that the control owners should take into account is the self-statement assessments. So they should complete the following assessment, which is the one we are showing now on the screen. And this assessment says that that myself as first line of defense as a control learner, I assure that I have reviewed all the policies, I have reviewed all the controls, and if they're having any changes, I have reported them. And then they sign that. So it's very important that these self-assessment statements are made by the control owners and that the information contained within it is accurate. And then they have also like different functions that we have already mentioned, so I will go very quickly through them. They must verify the correct description of the controls. They must comply with the self-assessment with the need to fulfill. They must conserve all the documentation. And finally, they must communicate to the Global Compliance Committee any non-compliance. Okay, so now we will go very quickly as well through the whistleblowing channel. So you know that you have a whistleblowing channel within Igenomix. You can report incidents by giving your name or in a confidential way, or you can be anonymous and do not identify yourself. Those options are all possible. So the way to access the channel would be that link, which is also on the screen. And then if you access to this link, you can report an incident by fulfilling all the fields that are stated here. So since this presentation is going to be sent to all of you, you can have a quick look to this mini guide, and you will see what you need to comply here in the whistleblowing channel. So you need to tell what happened. You need to review your report and add the location. Okay, so then you need to say if you are an employee or a former employee, or maybe even you can be a contractor or a supplier. Okay, so in the next days. Okay, yeah, it's important. Yeah, yes, yeah, it will be launched within the next month, right? Okay, perfect. So now this was everything we wanted to tell you about the compliance model that we have implemented here in Igenomix and that you have currently. I don't know whether you have any questions here or through the Skype meeting. Please feel free to ask anything you want to. Otherwise, we have a little test here that we want to do with you, for which you need your mobile phone. And
I have
if you don't have, you can share. And
hello, this is Alberto. I just have a quick question, please, regarding
sure.
the common sense. We are mostly dealing with private clinics, not really public. So you have been extensively explaining bribery or any actions that can be, risking us in a public setting. Just very simple. How about, for example, to host for a dinner a customer that, of course, is not intended to make any action to bribe her or him? Is that possible? Which kind of actions do we need to take?
Of course, it depends on the amount once again. So
well, we will use the common sense, of course.
Yeah, it's about common sense and about what are the policies in the company and the practices, the normal practices that are set in the sector. It has to do with it has to do with proportionality, because for example, in previous years, it used to happen that in the in the pharma sector, they tend to invite to some congregations to not only to the to the person who was giving the speech, but to the whole family to a 5-star hotel. Yeah. So that's not proportional. And yeah, it's about common sense. Yeah, as you were mentioned before.
Yeah, but should we communicate this action to I don't know, to our supervisor, just to make sure that we are, somehow communicating?
Yeah. Just in case you have any doubt, you just communicate it to. Yeah, you just report it to the Global Compliance Committee, or in case you are in another country, to the country manager, and he will let you know if it's possible or if you would be violated any provision.
Thank you very much for all your attention, and if you have any doubt, anything, you can report us as the Global Compliance Committee, or maybe in the next few days through the whistleblowing channel. Thank you for all of you.
Thank you very much.